was hungry.
Okay, we're recording now.
Are we hungry? Now shall I start? Shall I start? Oh, you're already recording?
Yeah, we're recording right now.
Okay.
So what we wanted to do here was just just talk to you about as far back as you can remember, like where your grandparents came from, or if you can remember back farther than that, if you heard any stories, that's fine too.
Well,
Yeah.
my parents was, my mother and father was Martin Landwer and Rosa Martin Landwer and Rosa Martin. And Dad's father and mother come from Kentucky, as far as I know. And there was 7 children. My father was the oldest. And they moved from Kentucky. They moved to Andale, Kansas. And then my mother's parents come from Germany. And I'm not sure, but I think there was 10 or 11 children. And they were all born in Germany, except my mother and her younger brother, Uncle Matt.
Oh, really?
And I'm not sure what year they came in. But anyway, mother and dad were married in 1900, September the 4th, 1900, and lived at Andale. Dad was a marshal, and they called him a drayman. He would pick up parcels and things at the depot and would deliver them to the stores and so on and so forth. And he was marshal. Well, they were at Andale. There was the 4 older ones were born. Johnny was the oldest. He was born 1901. Sister Marcella, her name was Mary, was born a year and a half later, which probably would make it be 1901 or something like that. Mm-hmm. And then Gertrude, and the last one was Bernadette, was born in 1905, June 4th. And the following spring in March, they moved to Sharon, Kansas. And Dad went and bought a farm. Mom never did go down and even look at it. Oh. Dad just bought it. And they moved all their things with a train, a railroad car, is how they moved their things. I don't know what they all had. I don't suppose they had too much. But Mom was very, very dissatisfied when she got down there. She left a nice home in Andale and moved out in the country and had an old house and not much to do with it.
Were they fairly well to do at that point?
No. But anyway, that's where they lived. And that's where the remainder of his children was born. There was 11 of us. The 4 at Andale. Well, the next one was Bertha. And she was born at Sharon. And she married John Schulte. And then in 1946, they moved to Fresno. John was, he was in the insulation business, I think. Well, anyways, they had 11 children. And they were all born in Kansas, at Zenda, Kansas. They were all born there except the 3 little ones. And John died in 63, pardon me. Well, get back to the Sharon bit. There was, next was Herbert. And he was born April the 8th a year and a half older than I am. So that would make him, let's see, I was born 1909. Well, he was a year and a half older than I am.
Yeah, maybe 1907.
Something like that. And I was born 1909, October the 12th at Sharon. And I was baby for 7 years, and they told me I was very spoiled. I was a baby. My dad nicknamed me Maudie, which is still sticking sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear some of your...
Maudie, yeah. Then, let's see now, then get back this, and then there was no more children until for 7 years. I was 7 years old, and then they had 4 more, year and a half apart. Francis was the next one, and he passed away in 1975 with a heart attack. Raymond was the next one. He went to service as in the Navy in 1940. He was in Pearl Harbor when the Japs bombed Pearl Harbor. He was on the U.S. Nevada, and they were hit badly. The Nevada had to be redone, I think 9 months or a year almost, in Bremerton, Washington. The next one was Martin Jr. And he was joined the Navy, I believe, in 1942, I think, as I remember. And then Mildred, the youngest one, she stayed at Sharon and married Walter Rickey, and they lived in the Sharon community all the time. Then Walter passed away in 1972, and she lives in Medicine Lodge. She had the drive-in. I'm sure you've heard of Mildred's drive-in.
Yeah.
The burgers.
I ate there a couple times.
We all ate there. Every time we'd go someplace, we'd eat there. And she'd feed the whole family. Never a penny. We wouldn't charge nothing. Everybody got fed free. And we kind of abused that, I believe. I believe. Well, anyway, let's see now. I grew up at Sharon, went to school there, and I met Cliff Blanchat in, 1928 at a Sharon picnic. He was a famous ball player, and he was Daniel's first baseman.
Is that right?
Uh-huh. Yeah, he
Oh,
was.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah, he was.
He was really good.
Oh, yes.
Baseball
Oh,
player?
yes. Him and George. George was the pitcher, his brother.
Uh-huh. I
And
remember
Cliff
George.
was the first baseman. And, oh, yes, he was, they had a big ball club.
Oh, I
But
didn't-
after
I
we
never
were-
heard that.
Then we got married November the 27th in 1929 at Sharon. And we lived with his parents, Joe and Alice Blanchat. I didn't say anything about the Blanchat family, did I?
That's all right. We can.
Well, anyway, we were married in 1929, November the 27th. Well, let me get back to the Blanchat family then, get that straight. His mother was Alice Colopy, and she married Joseph Blanchat, Joe Blanchat, and they come from Ohio. Milburn, Ohio, or Danville, in that area. Milburn, is there Milburn? Well, anyway, they come from there. And Grandma's Colopy's family built up the place where the silos are now, where Randy lives.
Right.
That is the 6th generation there, at that place.
Oh, is that right?
Yes, they built the place up. They come in 1983. I mean, 1883. And we do not know whether they come with a covered wagon or not. We don't know. We've
Yeah.
often wondered.
You said that's the 6th generation.
6th generation
Of
is living
Blanchat
there
there.
now.
Oh.
First was Grandma and Grandpa Colopy, and then Cliff's grandmother, Alice, and then Cliff, and then
Bill.
me.
Oh.
No, I wouldn't be included. Bill,
Yeah.
Randy, and Nicholas.
Oh, I see.
There's 6 generations there at that place. So it's quite a history on that.
That's the north barn.
Where
that you
the
always
feedlot is, where the feedlot is. And by the way, then we got married and lived with Grandpa and Grandma from November till March. There was an old house there, and it wasn't very good. We had to redo it. We had a paper, and we didn't fix up the upstairs. It was a 2-story house. It was pretty old.
I remember you talking about that.
Hadn't been taken care of. So we cleaned it up, and we moved in there in March, I believe it was, of 1930. See, and that's where Bill was born. See?
Oh.
That's where he was born. Well, we farmed, of course. Didn't have anything very much, and we lived there till October 1931. And Cliff's cousin lived at Medicine Lodge, a distant cousin. It was closer to Grandpa Blanchat. And they had a dairy farm. And he never married. And his sister
That makes noise.
was with him too, Mary Blanchat. And when Frank died, he died at 52 or 3 of cancer. Am I talking about that? Anyway, when they died, there was nobody left the house. So they offered us to go out there and turn everything over. But we had to buy everything, equipment, cattle, and everything. And we didn't have a dime. We didn't have nothing. So luckily, Cliff's father was administrator, and his cousin, Dr. Blanchat from Wellington, and they asked us if we wanted, and we said, well, yeah, we'd like to, but we didn't have any money. Well, they said, we'll see to it that you get it.
Oh.
So they went to the bank, and we borrowed every penny.
Is that right?
Every penny. And that was right at the break of Depression. We bought our cows. There's 50 milk cows, I think. They weren't all milking at one time. $50 a head, and within 6 months there was about $20 a head. But we had to pay that mortgage off, so naturally. Well, Depression hit, and it was pretty rough, very, very bad. But we were happy, Steve. We didn't have any money. We didn't go no place. We milked our cows, went to church, and that was it. We just didn't go no place. And Betty then was born. Bill was born at Grande. And then Betty was born in 1933, June the 29th, at Medicine Lodge, at the home, at the house. And we milked cows there, and just little by little got back on our feet. Really what put us over the hump was when she was baby. We were milking right close to 25 cows. And cream and was very, very cheap. About 8 cents a pound, eggs 5 cents a dozen. We had a neighbor that was a dairyman, and he also delivered the milk and cream in Medicine Lodge. It was a fairly good-sized town. Quarts, pints, half pints, whatever the customers wanted, see?
Oh.
And he gave us 25 cents a quart for our cream, sweet cream. He would come and pick it up twice a day. He had 2 children, and he had a pickup, and they'd fill their bottles on our kitchen table. We always usually had a 2-gallon bucket of sweet cream when we got through separating. We separated this milk. And then they'd fill these bottles, whatever the customers demanded, and then they'd go deliver it. Well, at night, they'd do the same thing. They'd come down and pick up our cream. Well, that 25 cents a quart was $1 a gallon, and we used to only get 8 cents a pound for our cream, which made it way far more. And that was what put us over the top.
Was he was paying you more than what
Yes.
market rates were?
Yes,
just to help you out? Or?
Yes. No, he needed.
Oh.
He needed it for his customers. He needed the sweet cream. He had a lot of people. In those days, people wasn't so conscious of what they ate. Everybody wanted cream, which I still do. And they'd be some men want quarts, and some want a pint, and some want a half pint. And he had trays with handles on, filled with bottles. And he with a big water pitcher, he'd fill those, cap them with paper tops, see, and then they delivered.
So you really had to pay for that stuff.
No, we didn't. No, that was his. No, all we did was furnish the cream. And he'd write it up on the counter every time what he'd take, be so many quarts, so many pints, and so on and so forth. Every 2 weeks he'd pay. And that's where we started getting money. Because before, whenever we sell something, we'd have to give it to the bank. See? We'd have to give it to the bank. And that's when we started getting on our feet. Well, in 1933 was in Depression.
He's kind of wiping you out there.
Anyway, the government went to buying up these cattle. There was too many cattle. There was over surplus. And as I remember, we got $15 for a yearling and maybe $30 for a bigger one. Mm-hmm. And they took them and killed them and buried them.
Oh, is that right?
So we had a bunch of young cattle, baby calves, and just all sizes. Well, that was a big price too, so we got that. Well, then, let's see now, then we went to, first it was the Depression, and then we had a drought. 3 years straight that we didn't raise hardly anything. And we even had to feed our cattle straw with molasses on it because we didn't have no grain. The corn dried up, everything dried up. 3 years drought, Depression, the Dust Bowl days.
Right.
The Dust Bowl days.
What years were that? Approximately?
Well, approximately, I'm not sure, 32, 33 in there. Mm-hmm. One Sunday afternoon, we come home, we'd been to my dad and mom's, and we come home and a huge black cloud come up in the west. It looked like, we thought it was a storm, a thunderstorm coming. And it was nothing but dust. It was so black. That was the Black Sunday. You've heard of it, I'm sure. The Black Sunday. And you could not even see. People out in Kansas got lost. They couldn't even get back to the house. It was just like midnight. The next morning when I got up, our kitchen door had blowed open, and I couldn't even see what color our bedclothes was. We had to wash the dishes. I cried. And I didn't have too very many cleaning supplies. Cliff went to town, was only about a mile to Medicine Lodge, and bought buckets and a broom and mop, and we went to cleaning, and it was pretty bad. Well, in 1934, it started getting better. This was 32 and 33, I think. It started getting a little better. We had some crops, and Betty was a year old. I milked, Cliff and I milked. We did have a man help us for, when she was little. We had a boy helping us, milk and do the farm work. We didn't farm very big, not like we do now. And had horses, of course, but we also had a tractor. And we lived at Bill started school. He started school at Medicine Lodge, probably 36. Because we left in 39. He was the third grade when we left. And Betty was in kindergarten when we left. We left March of 1939. Mm-hmm. We left Medicine Lodge.
Pick him up.
Can we come a second?
Yeah.
Oh, have you got it going?
Yeah. Let me check it just to make sure everything's here. We had to change the location so we could see your face better. The sun was shining in.
Well, anyway, we left, the reason we left Medicine Lodge, it was an estate. When Cliff's cousin died, it went to his brothers and sisters, it was an estate. Well, one of the girls' husbands, John Rainier, he come from Kenton, Oklahoma. He come to see us at harvest time. I don't think he trusted us. He thought he wasn't getting his share. But anyway, he managed to come there twice in harvest. And he'd watch Paul Richardson was our dairyman that picked up the cream. Mm-hmm. He'd watch us fill those bottles of cream and write on the calendar. And I think he had kept an eye on that calendar, how much we was getting. I think he thought we was making too much money. Kenton, Oklahoma was in trouble too, Depression years.
Right.
Well, anyway, in 1938, he told us that he was moving back. He had purchased the land from the other heirs. He bought the other heirs out, the Blanchat heirs. Oh. See, it was Blanchat. His name was Frank Blanchat, Frank and Mary Blanchat, and their brothers and sisters inherited because they didn't meet no children. See, they weren't married. Oh. Well, anyway, he told us so he didn't give us. We had 6 months' time to find someplace else to live. We didn't plan on living at all. We'd probably stay there permanently. Right. But we couldn't buy the land, and he didn't even give. Well, he bought it himself. He was an heir.
And he didn't give you the option.
No, he didn't. No, not at all. Not at all. So, luckily, Gertie, that's my sister, lived at St. Leo, Nashville, Kansas, and they knew of this place where we moved to that was up for lease, and he really talked to us, to Chet Carter. A nice big home, nicest place we'd had. It was a nice home. Mm-hmm. It was Mrs. Carter's parents lived there, and they both passed away. And Mr. Chet and his wife had their own home, and they didn't want it, so they leased it out to us. So we moved there, and it was a nice place. It was big two-story house. I think 3 bedrooms up. First time we had running water. No, we had running water in Medicine Lodge. We had electricity. No, we didn't have electricity either, but it was a nice home. Mm-hmm. It was nice.
And where was this at then?
At Nashville.
At
Nashville, Kansas.
Okay.
We went to church at St. Leo. And Betty did not finish her kindergarten year because we moved in March. But Bill was in the 3rd grade when we moved to St. Leo. So he finished his 3rd year there. And we were very happy there. We was doing good. Then we was farming and still not as many cows because we didn't have the pasture land. We only cut it down to about 12 or 13 cows. Oh. And we didn't have. There was 3 or 4 lakes there in the place. It was a nice place. Mm-hmm. And by the way, that's where Bill got his start. We had 4 big lakes, and they had muskrats there. And him and Betty Betty just go with him, tag along. But he set traps, and he trapped for muskrats. And they was pretty good price. and he would, every morning before he went to school, he had a saddle horse. I worried a lot because those swamps was around that lakes, and a horse could get buried in the swamp.
Uh-huh.
Well, anyway, he'd run his traps, and that night when he'd come home, he'd skin his muskrats and stretch them on boards. They had different sides. They're like shingles. You know what a shingle is?
Yeah.
Roof of a house, not the shake shingles, plain shingles.
Mm-hmm.
And they would had different size. They'd taper them the size of a pelt. The muskrats are, well, they look like a rat, only they're big,
Mm-hmm.
and their fur is good fur.
Oh.
And he would at nights, and Cliff would help him sometime. They'd skin those and stretch them on the boards,
Mm-hmm.
tack them down, hang them up in a shed, and let them dry. And when they were dry, they'd slip them boards out, and then they'd sell those pelts.
Oh.
In the later years, there was a guy started up and done his own skinning. He could do a better job. Sometimes the knife would slip and they'd cut the fur,
Yeah.
whatever, the pelt. Well, anyway, then they got sold the last year. They would just take, when they'd catch them, they'd be cold, of course. They'd keep 2 or 3 days pelts, what they'd catch. They were dead, of course. They were in steel traps.
Mm-hmm.
And they would take them over. He lived at Nashville, and they'd just sell the whole bit, he'd do his own skinning. Well, we lived there 4 years. And then the Pearl Harbor started up. And Cliff only had, well, I better get the Blanchat family, hadn't I? Cliff had, there's 8 of them. And Martina was the oldest, and she died at 7 years with scarlet fever. And then Cliff and George, they had 3 children when this scarlet fever come along, and they all 3 got it. And Martina died, but Cliff and George survived. And Cliff always had ear problems. You maybe remember seeing cotton in his ear.
Yeah.
That was from his scarlet fever.
Oh, maybe that's the reason he was hard of hearing
Yes,
too.
yes, it was. That he hurt his ears. And by the way, when Grandma's family come from Ohio, they had, I don't know how many children, 7 or 8. They were there 6 months when typhoid hit them. Their water was polluted.
Oh.
They lost 3 grown children in 6 months' time.
Mm-hmm.
The oldest was Millie, was 22, and then I don't remember the name. But they were in their 20s. 3 grown children, and a year later another one died. They lost 4 children in a year's time.
Oh my gosh.
It was the typhoid. And the water was polluted, whatever.
That's terrible.
Well, anyway, George, and then Cliff, and then Elmer, Martina, George, Cliff, Elmer. And he lived in Wichita. He worked at Stearman. Now he's the Boeing. He was one of the first ones to work at Stearman when they started. And he worked there, and he married, and of course, lived there till he passed away. Oh, in don't remember what year he died. In the 70s he died of a heart attack. And his family's still living there. And then was Magdalene. She married Paul Broadstone, and they moved to Oklahoma. He was in the oil fields. He was worked in the oil fields. And they moved to Oklahoma City, still live in Oklahoma City.
Mm-hmm.
But Paul passed away in 1979. And then Helen, still living in Wichita, she was a nurse. And Alfred, the youngest, was a twin. And when they were babies, they were only 3 months old. They were twin boys. And they had they were born in 1918. And they couldn't get any food to agree with them. They couldn't get nothing to agree. Milk didn't agree with them. Kind of finally, I think, got goat's milk or something.
Mm.
But Harold was the second one, and he passed away at 3 months. But Alfred is still living.
Oh, he is?
Yes. But the reason we went back to that, he was drafted in we moved in 42. He left December when Pearl Harbor. He left a day or 2 later. No, let's see. Pearl Harbor's what, 70?
No.
When was Pearl Harbor?
December 7th, 1941.
41, okay. He left in January after that. He left, 42. That left Grandma and Grandpa alone on the farm. And Grandpa wasn't working anymore. He was getting old. He wasn't really all that old, but in those years they was older than they are now, or they're in better shape now than they was then.
Sure.
But he wasn't working. And when Alfred left, there wasn't anybody to do the farm. Well, they wanted us to come back. And Cliff said, no, not unless you sell me the place, the home place. They built that in 1918, the home where they lived. Built a new home, nice home, still there.
That's the one that Bill lives in now.
That's the one Bill is living in, right.
Okay.
And so it really wasn't all that old when we moved. 2-story. First time we had electricity. We had water before, but never electricity. Had a Delco plant. Well, Cliff then finally agreed. He told him, he said, I'll move back if you sell me that 80 acres where the house is. He said, otherwise I won't. We had already moved twice. And he said, I don't want no more of it.
Right.
Well, they was almost forced to do it because they didn't want, Grandpa didn't want, he wanted to stay there. But Cliff said, well, I won't move unless I own the 80 acres. He said, well, you can just sell me the 80 acres where the house stood. We bought the 80 acres with, well, the house was built 20 years old then. It was built in 1918. I think they built the house where the twins were born. So they was built in 1918. We bought that 80 acres for $5,000. The house, everything. 80 acres of land and the big house. And there wasn't all that many, there was a barn there, but the other buildings didn't amount to a whole lot. It was a chicken house, but that was very little, didn't amount to anything. We tore it down. So we moved back March the 3rd, 1939 is when we moved, no, we moved to Nashville in 39.
Yeah.
March the 3rd, 1943 is when we moved back to the home place at Danville. And that's where we lived ever since.
Right.
Bill was in the 7th grade and Betty was in the 3rd grade when we moved back to Danville.
Right.
Okay, Bill of course graduated and went to school at Harper. And Betty, he did graduate in 48. Grandpa Blanchat died in 48. And the grandma lived, they bought a little house in Danville and moved into Danville. And
You were living,
we were living on the farm.
Both of you were, both.
Yeah, both lived in Danville. Grandpa Blanchat bought a small home, and it's still there, by the way. And it's right next door to where Dan lives. And Grandpa then died in 48. He had his legs was given. He had blood clots and stuff like that in his legs. But Grandma lived there. She didn't live there anymore. She didn't stay very long. She went to the children. She'd stay 2 or 3 months in one place, then go to another. She stayed at our house some. Then she stayed with the girls. I don't think she ever stayed with Elmer and Alfred. Alfred was drafted. See, he was in service. And from the time he left, which would have been probably in 42, and he was discharged. He was, by the way, he was wounded in Germany. In that D-Day, June, there, hi, Nicholas. Hi, Adam. He was in that D-Day invasion. You remember that when
Yeah.
D-Day?
When they landed on the beaches
he
in
was in a
Normandy.
boat, in one of those boats going in, and they were hit when they was going in. And
Now
that
this is Grandpa's youngest brother.
Alfred, Tubby. We call him Tubby.
Oh, that's
Tubby.
Oh, I didn't. He had a twin brother then.
Yes, he's the one that died.
Oh, I didn't realize
Harold
that.
was a twin brother.
Yeah.
But it was bombed, and that he never has fully recovered from that. His nerves were shot. He had a nice head of hair when he left. He never got home from the time he was drafted till he was discharged. I think in 46. I think 45, 46. I think when he come home, he was bald headed. It was pretty stressful, and he won't talk about it. He won't talk about it. But he come home then, and then we lived on the farm, and I think he felt a little bad that we had the place, but we were situated then, and he bought a little store in Runnymede. It is not there anymore. It's on K2, going into Harper. and him and his wife, he married Josephine Schenniger, and their first child was born there. But he was very dissatisfied, very. He ended up going to Wichita too, and
Right.
worked in Boeing's, and he's still there. But Tubby has never been well. The service stopped.
Mm-hmm.
His nerves were shot. Well, then we stayed there, and it was a little hard. We milked cows, farmed, we did the whole bit. Bill went to service, and my father died in 1950. He had diabetes.
That was Martin Langford.
Martin Langford. And he died in 1950. And my mother stayed there, and she built a new little home by the church so she could walk. And she died in 1964.
I remember her.
You remember Grandma Langford?
Yeah,
do
just
you?
barely, but I
Yeah.
remember when she was sick.
Well, anyway, we, in 1957, Cliff got so he wasn't feeling good. Bill come home, Bill went to service, he was in Korea, and he was there, joined the Navy,
Mm-hmm.
and he left in January of 1951. And he come home, though. Every year he had a 30-day leave. And he also was bombed. He was on the USS Los Angeles on a Navy cruiser. And his ship was bombed. But he wasn't hurt. He was a machinist. And the ship was hit, though. And we went out. We met him when they come back from Korea. We met the ship at Long Beach in May 1953. Well, in 1954, he graduated from high school in 48, and Betty graduated in 51 in Harper. And she went in nurses training, which the first year in September, she didn't like it. And she stayed only three weeks for the nursing training, and she quit.
Mm-hmm.
And then she worked at the bank, First National Bank. I believe it was First National. First, I think.
In Wichita?
In Wichita. From 1st of October till Christmas. And somehow or other she answered, they were advertising for, TWA was advertising for stewardess.
Mm-hmm.
You heard that story, have you?
Not
really.
fully, probably. But
Well, she was working in Wichita and was staying, she had rented a room close to my aunt. My aunt lived there, and she was staying in this room. And she'd come home every Saturday, usually, on the Doodle Bug. It was a train service. It was just one car, and they'd come through Wellington. It wasn't a whole train. They called it a Doodle Bug. It was a mail car,
Oh.
and it was just kind of like a coach. And it would come every morning at 8 o'clock, and then go back at night.
Mhm.
So she'd come on that. See, in those times, we didn't ride back and forth like we do now. But I don't know when she answered this advertisement, but around Thanksgiving, I think. It was in the paper, sign up for being a stewardess.
Mhm.
And she did. Lo and behold, one day, here comes a man to the house, and he was going to interview Betty Blanchat. Well, she's not here. She's in Wichita. Well, she wrote in our application to be a stewardess. Well, we didn't know anything about it. And we told him, well, she won't be home till Saturday. Well, I'll come back. So he did. Weekend she come home, and her dad was real enthused of it. I wasn't. I wasn't. She'd have to go to Omaha to school,
Oh, yeah.
airline school, 3 months school, 3 months training period, and they cost $500. Well, of course, we could do it, but we still didn't have any money. It wasn't flush, I can put it that way. And her dad signed. Really, I wasn't for it, but her dad signed up for it.
Oh.
And she worked till she had to enroll, I think, the 7th of January at Omaha. Go to school there. And we were milking cows at the time, and so she quit her job in Wichita just before Christmas, come home Christmas vacation, and we took her that first week in January. Cliff and I, we left at 4 o'clock in the morning. I'd leave 2:30, pretty early, and we drove her up in an ice. Well, it wasn't an ice storm; the roads were icy,
Mhm.
and it was really bad. We had never been on that. We'd never done any traveling, of course. But we had a good car. In the meantime, we changed cars every 3 or 4 years, so we had a good car. But it was cold. And we did something we should have never done. We dumped that girl off, didn't know a thing about Omaha, didn't know nothing. We took her to the school. They had a place for her to stay, although. There was a group of girls.
Oh,
They
that's
had
fine.
But we turned right around and went backseat, which we shouldn't have done. We should have investigated that more. We didn't.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't. We trusted everybody, see?
Yeah.
But anyway, we went about 40, 50 miles that night, didn't they? We stayed all night and went home the next morning. But we had to get home to come to Cattle. We had nobody to feed. See, Bill was gone. Betty was gone.
Oh.
We had nobody to do our chores. We just got somebody in to do our chores while we was gone. So we really had to get back,
Mhm.
see? Well, she finished her schooling in April and came on. They told her they promised her a job
Oh.
as a stewardess. I think they call her stewardess. They call them flight attendant now, don't they?
Right. Yeah.
Well, at that
changed the
time they
name.
called them stewardess. And they promised her a job. Well, they did fulfill that obligation, but they wanted to send her way off. I think one was New York, LaGuardia, I believe of that, or Florida. And we said no. She wasn't old enough. Really, she was only 18, I think.
Oh.
She wasn't very old. And
She probably wanted to go though.
oh yes, she went. But we said no. So she'd come home without a job. And they had fulfilled their obligation. They gave her, see to it that she had a job, see. Well, she was home well then in the meantime, she went up and applied at that, where the McConnell Air Base is now.
Mhm.
That used to be
The
airport. She applied at TWA and Continental, is where she applied, both. Didn't think she'd ever get a job, but she did apply. She was too young to be a stewardess. She was only 18, that'd be 21, I believe. 20 or 21, something like that. She applied for a job. Lo and behold, the latter part of June, TWA called her to come for an interview. She couldn't get on as a hostess, but she could get on as a reservationist.
Mhm.
Isn't that what they called it?
Something like
Like
that.
that?
Sure. I know what you're talking about though.
Okay, and she got the job, much to our surprise. At a very good salary, I believe she started, as I remember, around $240 a month. Yeah, but anyway, I think she got around $240 at the time, I believe, and she gradually got a raise. And that's where she met your dad. He was working with Continental
At the old airport.
at the old airport. And she really loved it. Oh gosh, she went weekends. By the way, she had a boyfriend first, and I can't remember his name. He was in the service, and she come to San Diego several trips.
Mhm.
I don't remember his name. I didn't really meet him. I saw his picture. But anyway, she went to Chicago and all over. She loved it, and that's where she met your dad, and that's where they was married. And she was married. Let me think. October the 30th,
54.
54.
Yeah. I remember
54. Okay, Bill was in the Navy, and he wasn't supposed to get out till the following January. He walked in on us on September, about the middle of September, one night at 9 o'clock. Am I making this too long?
No.
At 9 o'clock, and he had been discharged. We didn't know he was coming. We'd already made our Betty's wedding plans, and you probably heard of Earl G., Virgie's boy. He was supposed to be best man, see. We didn't even be able to get home. He was still in the Navy. Well, he walked in and he got a 4 months early discharge. They were giving him, war was over, and they were discharging the boys 4 months early. So he come home and was her best man. And that's where he met Verna. And Bill was, Verna, in the meantime, Betty and Verna roomed together at my aunt's house. She had changed rooming places. And her and Verna were roommates at Aunt Minnie's. So Verna was the bridesmaid, and Bill was the best man. And that's where Bill and Verna met. Well, Betty she had saved her money. She done real good. I tell you, that girl's done good. She saved her money and had a nice down payment on her home in Richmond. You remember the Richmond home?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've driven by since. I was
She
too
had
young then,
she
but-
had enough for a down payment, but not to complete the deal. I remember what she gave for it. But we had a friend in Danville, John Chevereau, was a wealthy farmer, and was good friends of us. And Cliff said, "Well, I think I can borrow the money from John." We didn't have any money to borrow.
Mhm.
We was doing okay, but we didn't have any money to loan out or
Right.
give.
Right.
But anyway, John Chevereau loaned her the remainder of the money to buy that money house on Richmond. She had enough for down payment,
Uh-huh.
and that's where they lived, see. So, let's see, where from then? Well, we stayed on the farm. Then Bill came home, and he had bought a farm before he left. While he was in the service, we had a friend, Mr. Carter, that we was renting from at Nashville. He also had money, but he lived in Wichita. Well, there's a farm come up for sale. You remember where Bill lived first? Across the river there?
Not really.
Not really?
Not really.
Well, it was 7 miles from where we lived.
Uh-huh.
And there was a farm come up for sale there. And Cliff thought it was a good buy, but we couldn't afford to buy it. And he said, let's ask Chet Carter, see whether he would buy it and let us farm it, let Bill farm it, let us farm it.
Uh-huh.
He liked Bill. When we were living in Nashville, Bill would spend his summer vacations with him. He'd go for a month
Oh.
and stay with him, not a month, about 2 weeks
Uh-huh.
in Wichita. And their children were all gone, and Chet liked Bill very much. Well, anyway, Bill would spend every year, he had a vacation with Chet and Mrs. Carter in Wichita. And Chet liked him. Well, when Cliff called Chet and he said, "Chet, would you be interested in buying that land? They want $9,000 for that quarter." Well, he said, "I'll come down and look at it." And they were plumbing at the time. Am I saying too much?
No.
Well, anyway, Chet said, he come out and said, "I'll be there for dinner." But at that time, we fed everybody that came, everybody ate with him. And he said, "I'll be there for dinner." And they said, "Fine." And Cliff told him where the place was. And they were plowing. He went out to the field where they were plowing. Hi, Adam. Anyway, he rode around with him on the plow. And they come in for dinner. I had dinner ready. It was in the summertime. Bill was still in service. He was home on leave. It was in July. He was still in service. But he was home on a 30-day leave. And they come in to eat, and after dinner, Chet said, "Well," he says, "to get back to the land deal," he said, "Bill," he says, "why don't you buy it?" Bill looked at him and he said, "You buy it? I don't have anything." Well, he said, "You don't have to have anything." He said, "I will buy it." And he said, "I will furnish the money." And he said, "We'll put it in your name." And he said, "If for some reason," he said, "I think you'll do it." He said, "I think you can make it." But he said, "For some reason," he said, "you can't." He says, "I'll take the land back." He said, "You won't be out anything." But he said, "You'll make it." He said, "I'll furnish the money." I forget what rate interest, I don't know, it was cheap interest
Yeah.
at that time. 4% maybe, I don't know.
Because he liked Bill.
He liked Bill.
Uh-huh.
And they talked there, and Bill was just flabbergasted. Oh, he said, "I can't handle it." He said, "Oh, yes, you can." He said, "I'll furnish your money. You're not losing anything." He said, "You can't make it well." And Bill had started with his trapping money. With that trapping and muskrats, he had bought cattle. He bought the first money, and when we lived in Nashville, he bought a 4-H calf, $45 a steer. Sold his steer, and he bought heifers. Well, but kept increasing hers. By the time he bought that land, he had 12, 15 head of cows already. He was kind of running us out.
Yeah.
So he had a herd of cattle, see? But he didn't have anything else. Well, okay, all right, they did that. Well, Bill had to go back to service, and Cliff and I done his farming. Betty helped plow at that place too. We plowed, but Bill paid all of the expenses. He paid all the expenses. Gas and oil and whatever. We were farming in tractors.
From his salary out of the Navy? Send
Well,
that home, or?
yeah, he had, every month he had sent home a bond, all the time he was in the service. And we had banked all of that money in the bank. He had money saved up.
Yeah.
And then he had enough to put the wheat out. We done the work free, we furnished the equipment, but he paid his bills. And so when he come home, he had a place, see?
Uh-huh.
And then the next next year, before he got married then he come home in September of 54. He met Myrna. By Thanksgiving they were engaged. February the 5th they were married. And by the time he come home, we had his place paid for.
Is that right?
Right. Well, we raised his crops, see? He got his crops off with his wheat.
$9,000 it was paid.
We had it
Wow.
paid for.
That's pretty amazing.
We had it paid for. Very little left. He
Uh-huh.
had it pretty well paid for, as I recall. I might have a few mistakes on it, but I think so.
Uh-huh.
And when he got married, there was another farm come up for sale. The first place had no home on it. It was just land with a little pasture on it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the next place then he bought had a home on it, and that's where they moved to. And they lived there till 57, and we lived on the home place till 57. And then Cliff he had problems. He was not feeling good. And that's when we went to San Jose. We spent 2 winters in San Jose with the intention of maybe staying there if we liked it. My sister lived there, and they had the Bernie Burgers. They had a drive-in.
Oh.
And the first we lived in an apartment. We'd go in November, both winters. We went in November, and we'd come home in March when the work started. We were still farming. But Bill and Myrna moved into our house for the winter months, and then he had a hired man to help him because he needed help with the cattle. We had cattle. By that time, Bill was having cattle too. That cattle feed. He was getting ahead. Anyway, Cliff was sick. The first winter we done fine. He helped in the burger business. He liked it. So we went back the next winter. Again, moved Bill and Myrna down in the house for 3 months, but it was such a chore moving the chickens and all that Cliff said, we won't do it again. He said, we planned on staying in San Jose.
Uh-huh.
We were only there 10 days, and he had a stroke, and he was sick all winter long. All
Grandpa
winter
had a
long, yes.
stroke then?
Yes, he had a stroke.
Oh, I didn't know that
Yes.
either. Huh.
He was in a hospital in and out in San Jose, and he couldn't do nothing. And that's when the doctor said we had to get off the farm.
Oh.
And we come back. Betty flew out. Well, first was going to take him with a plane because didn't think he could drive. We had a new Chevy, a 58 Chevy. And Dr. I forget his name, in San Jose said, Betty was still working at TWA. And he said, I think your dad and Betty come out when Cliff was sick. She stayed with, that's when you stayed with Virgie. You was baby.
Hmm.
Remember? Probably don't.
What year was that again?
57, 58.
Oh, I wouldn't
58.
I wouldn't remember that.
58. Well, anyway, she come stayed with me a week, and the doctor said, I think we can, but then she had to go home because she was also working. No, she quit working when you was born. She wasn't working anymore. That's right, she wasn't working. But anyway, she flew back in March. She could still get a pass, and we drove him home, but he was sick.
Hmm.
And as soon as we got him home, we entered him in Wichita in the hospital, and they done the cystoscope on him, and that was his problem. He had a kidney problem.
Oh.
And they knew it in California, in San Jose, but Cliff wouldn't agree to let him to operate. He had to have surgery.
Hmm.
And we took him right into Wichita. The next day, Betty and I drove, and we changed off, and we drove home in 2 days. And then we entered him in the hospital, and then he recovered. So we wasn't going to move. We told Bill he could live there permanent. So we rented a house in Arroyo, and we lived there. We lived there a month and a half, 6 months, 6 weeks, and Cliff said, Mom, he said, I always promised you a new house. He said, we can't rent a house all our lives. So we bought the 3 acres there at Danville, and we was going to build a house. But it was wheat in there. It was a patch of wheat. It was 3 acres of wheat. As soon as the wheat was harvested, we had made our plans, had everything ready. They started building the house. And they completed it we moved in the 20th of December in 1959.
Remember that's etched in your concrete, I think.
Yeah, 1959.
Mm-hmm.
And Bob and Dan were born while we were living in Arroyo.
In 58.
In 59. They were born in August 59. Because we moved 59.
Yeah, I guess that's right.
They were born in 59.
Yeah, you're right, 59.
59. We moved in these, I think you were not, no, we didn't go to our house for Christmas, we weren't built for Christmas. And that's where we lived till,
No,
lived till,
they were born in 58 now, because I was 56. Bob's about a year and a half younger than me.
could be,
Yeah.
could have been 58, could have been 58.
Small
Yeah,
point.
you're right.
Small point.
You're right, 58, 58, you're right.
Uh-huh.
And that's right, but we moved in our house because Dan was born there. Yeah, because Dan was a baby when we lived in Arroyo. You're right.
Mm-hmm.
In 59 we built the house, and we moved in December the 20th, 59. And then Cliff never did really work too much. He kind of recovered then.
Yeah.
He farmed again a little bit. For a year or two, Bill done all the farming. He would help, and finally he wasn't doing too good. And Bill said, Dad, farm some land, not all of it, and he did, till 73, and that's when he got sick.
Yeah.
And after that, he didn't do anything anymore. So, and then he died then in we had our golden wedding in 79.
79.
And then we were going to spend the winter. We spent the winter in San Diego that winter. And then we come home, and then in 81, he discovered he had cancer. We made a trip back to Ohio. He had 6 weeks of almost 36 treatments, X-ray treatments,
Uh-huh.
and he passed away then in November the 6th of 1982.
Yeah. I
And
remember
I'm
that.
still there. I'm struggling along. I'm still pruning trees and taking care of the yard. And now I'm here with Adam and Steve. Yeah, we're here with Adam. We better quit, haven't we?
Present day.
Yeah, we're here with Adam now. And Adam likes Granny. Don't you, Adam? You like Granny? Do you like Granny? Yeah, we're with Granny now. We're here we're in California with Steve and Denise. And this is Adam. This is our 6th great-grandchild. And we got 2 more coming. Debbie was married and is divorced now, has 2 little boys.
Mm-hmm.
Jason is 9, Eric is 7. And Christy are married, and they have Elise, a little girl, she's a year old. And next is who? Dan isn't married. Randy and Deborah were married, I don't remember, 82, 81. They have Nicholas. Jeff and Anna Ruth were married then in, let's see, Cliff died in 82, 83. And they are expecting a baby in June. And Susan is an RN in Wichita in the cardiac department. Debbie is in emergency in St. Francis. And let's see now, who's next? Nancy is going to school at Creighton, Omaha.
Mm-hmm.
And Steve is married and living here in California. We have Adam with us. Bob is our airline co-pilot, and I flew out with him from Denver, which was a thrill. Tim is in Wichita and has little Lori.
Mm-hmm.
So I have 6 great-grandchildren and 2 on the way. 10 grandchildren and 6 greats.
Mm-hmm.